Okay, we're gonna do an Uther guide, all right? I told myself I wasn't really sure if I would do this. Now, one of the reasons why I've held off on doing an Uther guide is mostly because Uther was used as a second healer slash tank. They've done a lot in the last several months to try and rebalance Uther so he's not just the big tanky healer that can go out and press Q for free because of his Q at 1 and 4. I'm not even going to touch that because a lot of you used to think auto attack Uther was the hotness. It's not, right? And before we get into the talents, I want to cover a few very important details. The Uther's listed as easy, but understanding when, where, and how to use Uther is probably more important than his talents, and it'll probably make sense as we get into this, all right? So your Q, first and foremost, you heal when you heal more when you heal a target. If you heal somebody else, you get half of that healing, and of course you're getting all the armor and all that stuff as well. His trait is so impactful in the game that it can oftentimes be the difference between winning and losing a fight, and winning fast is what Uther does best. But there has been some tweaks, right? So whenever you hit somebody with your ability on your team, they get 25 armor. It does not stack with itself. Upon dying, and dying as Uther is something you have to do. I know that sounds counterintuitive to a lot of people you're playing, but you dying can sometimes be the difference between you winning a fight and losing a fight, and furthermore, winning a game and losing a game. We'll talk more about that as things go on. You get to use Flash of Light on a much lower cooldown, and you get to do it for 8 seconds, which means you can spam heals and spam armor. And having those heals for 8 seconds, a pretty significant amount of time in a fight. Let's talk about Uther as a whole, because there's going to be times where you want to Q yourself, but you should be focusing on queuing other people. Your W does the same thing. You heal everybody in a line, but it also does damage. They just buffed the healing on this and the cooldown from 12 to 10 seconds, which means you have a pretty good healing output. But the big part about Uther is his E button. It is a point and click stun. That's why it was so easy to play as tank. Now, using this should be used to set up kills and or follow CC. You rarely are going to go in and stun by yourself pre-16 to try and lock somebody down. Now, a lot of this is going to be focused on Heal Uther, and Heal Uther needs to understand that you're okay to play somewhat backline Uther for a little bit. Your job is to go in, occasionally drop the hammer, and just kind of stay back. Standing up there and be an auto attack Uther, stop trying it. Just try hanging back for a little bit and understanding to go in and be an opportunistic healer or opportunistic stun bot while also being in position so your W hits more of your allies and the people on the other team, and also to be in position to see the battlefield better. A few things about maps, because normally I try and cover maps towards the end. Uther's really bad on objectives that take a long time because his cooldowns are long, not as long anymore. So they might need some more testing, and his mana pool is really bad as a result because they eat up so much mana, and a lot of people that spam your E. If you watch the Malfurion guide, you would know that I said stop spamming roots because that's where a lot of your mana is going. 40 mana every 10 seconds is 1/11th of your mana pool at level 1. Use this 2 to 3 times in a 30-second fight, which on a map like Alterac Pass means that you've just depleted a third of your mana for stuns. And if you're not getting kills off those, you're wasting mana. So a few things to consider. Maps like Alterac Pass can be bad. It can easily work, don't get me wrong. But the longer fights go on, the harder it is for Uther to win them. Going against spread damage like a Lunara or something, or early picking an Uther can generally be countered because you're early picking an Uther and then all of a sudden they're just getting a lot of AoE damage and things are much more difficult. Uther is a great counter towards burst heroes like a Jaina, like a Kalthos, things like that that have momentary damage but big impact. That's where Uther kind of fits in. So I normally hop right into the talents, but I feel like Uther really needs to be explained that you should be trying to pick him towards the middle or the end of the draft. He might be better now because his W is buffed. His armor is very hard to gauge because your effective health is very different. Yes, you get heals, but you're also getting armor for an extended period of time. These are really hard to kind of gauge. Yes, he's easy to play according to this, but understanding the mechanics of when to do certain things. At level 1, actually like all of these talents, except for Hammer of the Lightbringer. It's kind of a thing of the past, and really, I think that right now, one of the things I've got my eye on most is the W build for Uther. Now that they've brought this from 12 to 10 seconds and gave it a 10% buff in terms of healing from 177 to 194 baseline, that's level 0 values, it's around 200 at level 1, we're now looking at potentially more value at level 1 here from your new W. Damage or heal heroes 60 times with Holy Radiance. Your reward is that it increases the duration of devotion by 0.5 seconds. Now, their passive on this is damaging or healing heroes with Holy Radiance refunds 5 mana, which is good for the mana problem, and it reduces its cooldown by 0.75 seconds. If this is a 10-second cooldown, and I hit 4 heroes, 2 on my team, 2 on the other, 3 on my team, 1 on the other, we're talking about a 3-second cooldown. And that goes from a 10-second cooldown to a 7-second cooldown instantly, while simultaneously having a 2-second uptime or a longer uptime on my devotion. So a 2-second uptime on that devotion. Afterwards, it's 2.5. That's a 7.5 seconds minus that 3 seconds that I just gained on that. So we're talking about a 4-second downtime between heals and or armor, which is pretty significant. You're not always going to hit everybody on your team, which can make things difficult. But in an ideal situation, that's not a lot of downtime to have healing and or effective health pool being buffed by 25 armor, making it a very strong pick at level 1 with the buffs having a shorter cooldown. If we look at recent history, Diablo with Diabolical Momentum, Battle Momentum, cooldowns off autos, this functions similarly. Diablo went from being really scary to now his auto attack build is really strong. I think we're going to see some of those similarities here with the W build, because you take something from 12 to 10 seconds, already a pretty big buff, and now you inherently buff it with this level 1 talent, things look even better. So you have a lot of things to consider and play around with that. I do think that going Silver Touch, which reduces damage, this is really easy to finish, but the reward lowers the mana cost, but it also increases the range. This was normally pretty good with Holy Shock here, but as a result, this is more of an offensive oriented thing, but having the cooldown reduction on this, or excuse me, the mana cost reduction on this, considering the mana values of your Q is 80, is a lot. So that helps a lot with the mana retention. And I know what you're saying. Well, you get mana back by auto attacking. Go back to the first thought of auto attacking as Uther can be very difficult. If I'm playing against a Garrosh, Diablo, a Johanna, an ETC right now, all of these characters will punish my positioning. And that's why I'm saying as an Uther, you probably need to be more cautious. And so because of that, W is a safer way to play. Now, there is going to be situations where auto attack build is okay. If I'm playing against the Stitches or a Tyrael, they don't have much in the way of CC beside that or around that. That's normally when you can kind of pick whatever you want. That's why Stitches is such a bad character, because he has no real CC to stop anybody from doing whatever they want. So those are rare situations, not super rare for somebody like Uther, but it kind of depends on the scenario of when can I be aggressive versus when can I not. That's kind of hard to get into because Uther, there's so many caveats with that we're going to focus mainly on the W build here. At level 4, there's some good and bad around all of this. Holy Shock, I actually think this is awful. For all of you that pick Holy Shock, and for some reason there's a lot of you, I hate this. I really do. Holy Light can be used on an enemy to do 40% of its healing amount as damage, which means that I'm no longer prioritizing that on my team. My team better all have healing abilities, like a Diablo, a Kira, or an Imperius, a Rainer in the back, to where like I can be more liberal with my talents because they can all heal themselves. The odds of that happening aren't always extremely high, so I don't really like that. You receive the self-healing benefits, and its cooldown is reduced, and it refunds mana, which is why it used to pair so well with the level 1, because it used to only cost the same amount of mana that you were spending. Essentially, you'd actually get 5 back. Now, the way that this works, now, if you continue to go down the earlier thought process of, I need to be opportunistic around my stuns. I don't want to stun on cooldown, although that can be good. I'd like to pair it with somebody on my team. If an ETC on my team is able to go in, boom, let's go. I'm looking and waiting. I'm in the middle of the battle. I don't want to be at the front. I don't want to be behind everybody. I kind of want to be in that area so that I can capitalize with my hammer. One of the things that does is this allows you to, Hammer of Justice increases Uther's movement speed by 25% for 3 seconds. Now, this sounds kind of silly, but it means that I can play somewhat aggressive. I go in there, I drop the hammer because the cast range on this is pretty generous.
then I can scuttle on out of there if I need to, or make something else happen. I can stun, and then I can move around them for body blocks. There's a couple of different ways to utilize this so you can get the value of your stun while also not being punished for walking up versus something like a Garrosh or an ETC who's just going to slide you. This is pretty sad when it comes to what the best talent is, or one of the better talents of this tier, because it's literally just like stun and move so you don't get killed. That's pretty much the name of the game. But if a lot of what you're doing is kind of an all-in composition, this can be good for body blocking. Now, if I'm in an all-in composition that also has a lot of aggression and a lot of self-healing, I actually really like Holy Fire. I think Pursuit of Justice and Holy Fire are both very good talents. But for most people, I think Pursuit of Justice is probably going to be easier and better. Holy Fire is actually really good. Dealing 13 damage per second to nearby enemies. Basic attacks against enemy heroes increase that damage by 20%. So if I walk up and I have a very aggressive team that's going to benefit from my armor, that's going to be all standing and moving in front of me, excuse me, as soon as we engage and things like that, boom, like I don't have to hammer and run. My team is down to fight. If I'm playing with a Raynor and a Kalthos, they're probably not going to be willing to dive in. If I have an Anub'arak that wants to run here and I've got two people that can't quite make it in, I might be the only thing that can stop them with a hammer, but do I make it out? Holy Fire, though, with more of an aggressive comp, now says I can go in, I can stun, auto, and now I'm creating not only, this is something I talk about a lot, creating targets and creating opportunities for your team. Point and click stun is the easiest possible thing in the game. So now we get point and click stun, and I can do a little bit of damage to that priority target. If I'm following CC, which I never want to stack my CC, I want to stagger it. If I'm stunning and getting that damage in, we've created an easy stun target. Somebody can follow up on this. Maybe we've got a Kalthos with gravity lapse. Maybe our ETC slid after because it's a priority target. We're now creating a priority target. I don't need to get out of there as quickly because we have good protection and everything else around it. Now I'm doing a little bit of damage, and I can be more aggressive and then dip out when needed. That's why both those talents can be very good. Level 7. If you are a healer and you have cleanse, you have to pick cleanse. Not maybe, not kinda, not but, you have to pick cleanse. Now, let's do an example. If, and this is a big if, the enemy team has little to no CC. Let's say they have a Thrall and a Tyrael, and their backline is Raynor and who knows what else, and say a Gul'dan. Cleansing a Fear is pretty good. Cleansing a lot of these things are good. I am willing to give a pass. Let's say they have a Johanna and nothing else. Cleansing Blessed Shield can be the difference between your team dying and not dying. At the same time, there's merit to Guardian of Ancient Kings. Healing a hero that is stunned, rooted, or silenced increases the armor bonus they receive from devotion from 25 to 50. Now, the reason why this is different is because if I am going against somebody that has multiple CC, am I going to cleanse one target and let the other one die? Am I going to cleanse one target and heal the other target and hope 25 armor saves them? Or am I going to give them 50 armor? The odds of that being more valuable than cleanse are not that frequent. Furthermore, if I am going against the Johanna and they have no other CC, as an Uther, I get to play really aggressive. Johanna doesn't really scare me. Not only that, but there's a mini stun on her Condemn, which would proc Armor of Faith, which means that I could go and do something to play around this, because being stunned or rooted is minimal. There's not a whole lot to worry about there. These are very rare circumstances, which if they have more than one form of CC that can stack or stagger and kill your targets, go cleanse. Always go cleanse. Now, there is some appeal for Divine Storm. I think if you're playing with a highly aggressive composition, Divine Storm can be okay. I think for the most part, Divine Shield is much better. I want to talk about the reasons why and some of the proper uses of Divine Shield. The biggest mistake that we see on people that play characters like Rhaegar or Anduin and a lot, or let's say Ariel, who has Crystal Aegis, is that they wait for people to get low and then they use their save buttons. Now, for what it's worth, Ancestral's kind of in that area. Divine Shield. If I look around and I have a Vala over here and I just use my Q and my W, Divine Shielding her doesn't really do much unless she is completely out of the fight. But why am I Divine Shielding her? Divine Shielding somebody at 10 to 20% health is generally considered bad unless I know they can get out of there because you get 20% movement speed, or I can heal them within the time that it takes because they are invulnerable for 3 seconds. So the Divine Shield gives them the movement speed to get out of there, but also at the same time, I don't always want to Divine Shield somebody at 10% health. Like when they come out of that, they just die. Like, right? I don't need to save Ancestral for that target to get to 20 to 30%. If they're getting killed and they're at 50 to 40%, Ancestral is mega value. Like a lot of times people misuse Divine Shield. Now, to go further down the line of Divine Shield, who do you Divine Shield and why do you Divine Shield them? Everybody knows that if an ETC is using Mosh Pit, you can pre-cleanse. But if pre-cleansing isn't an option and Mosh Pit's 4 seconds and cleanse lasts 1 second, maybe I Divine Shield that target so we get full max value. That kind of depends. If I have 3 to 4 people in that Mosh Pit, yeah, I'm going to Divine Shield that so we have an insane combo and they can't get out of it unless they have multiple buttons they can use to save the targets instead of interrupt. So there's a few things that you can do in that scenario. Now, if it's not an ETC, think about this scenario, right? Who has the greatest impact in a team fight? And most of the time, it's going to be your range damage. Very rarely is it ever going to be your tank like an ETC that's going to be the one worth saving. If you're telling me that I can get an extra 3 to 4 seconds out of a Vala, out of a Greymane, out of all of these characters, it's going to be a lot better than me getting 3 to 4 seconds out of a Mal'Ganis, out of a Johanna. Those aren't normally the characters that are going to have a great impact over that 3 seconds that I can grant somebody of complete immunity. Now, if I have a Greymane on my team and my team is an aggressive team, I'm not going to wait for my Greymane to get low. Being immune means that he can't be CC'd. He can't be blinded. So if my Greymane gets in there, I might Divine Shield him early because I know that he can get maximum value and turn a fight in 3 seconds more than any other character in the game. There's a lot of things you have to take into consideration, but 95% of the time, you should probably be Divine Shielding an allied ranged assassin because they can have a greater impact in those moments. If I'm going against a Pyroblast, I'm probably saving Divine Shield to do whatever. If I'm playing with a Vala, who picked Gloom at 13, I'm hoping that they stack their hatred and can self-cast Gloom, and we don't have to pick this. The problem is it's really hard to communicate that in Storm League, and it's also really hard to get a Vala that knows to press their own button there. So there's a lot of things you can do to kind of keep an eye out. And so in those situations, you want to be there. Now, to go further down the Uther train, you almost never want to Divine Shield yourself. And we go back to the earlier talking point of armor. When I die, I do more healing than I do when I'm alive. I don't, and I think this is a really good point to talk about this. As an Uther, my buttons are on such long cooldowns that the odds of me getting another rotation and another rotation and another rotation, if the fight drags on that long, can be really low. As an Uther, if we're in the middle of a fight and it's like, man, somebody's about to die and I'm about to die, we both need to run, one of us is gonna die. What can you do to change that? I can run my happy little feet in there, drop a hammer on somebody and maybe scoot out. Or I can run in there, drop a hammer on somebody and say, please kill me. I want me to die. I don't want my teammate to die because I sacrificed myself as the healer. Not only that, but now I might actually be able to heal that person and they might kill you as a result. And there's varying degrees of when your team should re-engage for an Uther and when they shouldn't. So a lot of times as an Uther, and we'll use as a very simple hypothetical, we come into a fight, I get my W out, everything's cool, I get a Q out 5 seconds later, we get another fight, I get my W out, everything's still brawling. I get some stuns in, and now I'm in there and I'm swinging away. I'm Holy Fire Uther. I'm ready to go. My team's at about 40 to 50% health. That armor's wearing off. I don't have the healing throughput like other healers, and we're starting to get in trouble. I walk in there as Uther. I get that third round of healing out, and I'm like, boom, I got no more cooldowns. My best bet is to die. I need to die. I'll get a divine shield off somewhere, but I'm running in there and I'm trying to eat everything that I can to die as fast as possible so that my team has a healer for 8 seconds that has heals on a couple second cooldown that's passing out armor and heals like candy. That's my goal as Uther. And so that's why you should almost never divine shield yourself unless it can be the difference between winning a fight and losing a fight. Normally as an Uther, let's say I get everybody on my team's 100% health and I get pyroblasted. An extreme example. It's probably better for me to be alive in that fight instead of like, guys, I got 8 seconds. Like the rest of them have taken 0 damage. But if I'm alive for 8 seconds, you'll kill them in 8 seconds. It's probably not likely. So you have to kind of gauge those differently. Rarely divine shield yourself. Rarely divine shield the tank unless it's a high impact situation. And try and shield your ranged assassins and let them get that bonus damage. And don't wait for somebody to be 10% health before you're like, ooh, now I'll save you. Unless you have heals right behind it, that divine shield does nothing other than give them a way to walk back to the base. It's not worth it at that point. So try and gauge that. And it's not always going to be a guaranteed situation where you know when to divine shield and when not to divine shield. But that's what you should be looking for in that situation. At 13, all of these are good. As far as this goes, I think all of these are open to the situation. I'm going against that Pyroblast or whatever. There's some big damage. Spell Shield. As with every hero with Spell Shield, this starts automatically on. Get used to turning this off and turning it on when you need it. If you don't turn this off and turn it on when you need it, pick a different talent because you're bad at that point. And I don't have any other nice way to say it, is that a Diablo Fire Stomp can trigger this on its way out and on its way in. And now all of a sudden that 50 spell armor was triggered by an ability that did 75 damage, as opposed to saving it for something that could have done more. At that point, you don't have a talent. You just wasted your 13. And that's how I need to explain that. It says can be toggled to allow or prevent this talent from triggering automatically. Read that part of it. Don't be bad. Now, if you're not comfortable with that, which you should get used to it, and it's not every scenario you have to. Let's say the other team has a Greymane. Let's say the other team has a Genji. Uther's a great counter towards Genji. Genji loves to dive in. What works well? Point and click CC. So in this situation, a Greymane, a Kerrigan, an Alarak, a Kira, a Greymane, these diving heroes that can come in and have a major impact as an individual versus your team can be well met with the level 13 talent. You bring a hammer down, you get the point and click stun, which is really easy. It creates a priority target. You should be sitting on this for priority targets anyways. And it's going to reduce their movement speed, which means it's harder for them to get out. And it reduces their damage, which means that if it's something like a Genji and he can somehow not take damage in that time, he can get back and start doing stuff. But reducing that damage for 3 seconds can be really strong. So well met can be good against those types of heroes. Other situations, and I mentioned sometimes auto attacking can be very hard if they have a dive team without a ton of CC, but some CC. I think Blessed Champion can be really good in those situations. After you use Holy Light, you get more healing throughput. This is good against a lot of AoE damage potentially, or when you know you're suffering an onslaught from multiple people diving at you. For the next 5 seconds after using Holy Light, your basic attacks heal you and nearby allied heroes for the total amount healed by Holy Light. So it can be pretty good in that situation because you're getting more healing throughput, but it's kind of hard to read when this is good. I think this is honestly the de facto #1 pick, and the other one are kind of situational. This should be like well, I don't know which one to pick because none of the other two are good. This should be fine. And if there's not an abundance of situations for the other two, this one's still good. It's not beautiful, it's not pretty, but you have to remember post 13, this is where it's going to be at. Now for the hardest talent tier to really try and tell you which is the best and when you should do it. This is honestly the hardest one. When I was looking at the talents before the day started, I was really deliberating on which one to pick. Now, which one's good and which one's better? Why is it good versus the other one? Now, for the longest time, Benediction has been the #1 pick. Why is that? The 60-second cooldown. And honestly, this is like having a heroic. Why is it like having a heroic? Because of this talent right here. If you're telling me I can stun somebody, point and click, stun somebody for 2 seconds, there's very few characters that can do that in the game. There's very few characters that can do that. Varian's taunt is not that long, and they're still actively attacking. Garrosh has an AoE taunt, which is like a 1.5 seconds, but there's not much more that does that other than a mosh pit, right? So Benediction has traditionally been used to make sure you Benediction, you stun, get the full duration of a stun, and smack down another stun. Who's going to be able to survive being stunned by one person for 2 seconds? Double Q, maybe in a very rare circumstance. Double W, maybe in a very rare circumstance. But Benediction into double stunned is one of the most ridiculous things imaginable. You activate to reduce the mana cost of the next ability by 50 and its cooldown by 10 seconds. So dropping this, because this is a 10-second cooldown, says that I'm going to stun Benediction stun, right? I don't want to come out there and just bam, bam. That's bad. That goes back to the point earlier of I don't want to stack my CC on top of each other. If I stun, wait 0.25 seconds and stun again, that's 1.25 seconds of stun time. However, if I stun, wait a second, stun again, that's 2 seconds. That's staggering CC so you don't stack it and overlap it. Pretty easy concept, but now you're doing it yourself. This is like a heroic ability for Uther because it pairs so well with the stun. So this is something you have to consider with Uther of using this and knowing when to use this. The whole premise of point and click CC and creating a priority target, amazing. Now, if you are playing Battle Uther, guess what? I can now go to somebody, Benediction, stun, and if I went Divine Storm, stun them again for a 3.5 second single target CC. It's pretty ridiculous. It sometimes baffles me that it's actually in the game. Needless to say it is, and that's how that would work should you go Divine Storm and you can easily kill somebody. Your team can't kill somebody, a single target that's sitting still for 3.75 seconds, because the other team did a really good job with shields or cleanses or something to save that target. All right. Now, as far as the W goes here, this is really intriguing for me because I feel like I need to do more testing. But this has been tweaked so many different times that I feel like I need to read this out loud. This increases the damage and healing of Holy Radiance by 10%. So this already got a 10% buff in healing plus a pretty significant healing or cooldown reduction from 12 to 10 seconds. This went from 177 to 194, and it went from 12 seconds to 10 seconds. So your healing throughput's really high. Now it buffs it another 10%, which means that you could conceivably have more damage or more healing, mostly focused on the healing aspect. Basic attacks against enemy heroes cause Uther's next cast of Holy Radiance to have its damage and healing increased by an additional 10%, stacking up to 4 times. So you could have 10 or 40% more healing on a W. Now, it's nowhere near. 40% more healing doesn't even equal what you get out of a Q, but you're looking at an AoE heal as opposed to a single target heal. Harder to pull off. It's harder to get value out of this, but the numbers kind of back themselves up. It's a pretty significant amount of healing. If we go back to the earlier formula of 10-second cooldown, I go W quest at 1. There's 3-second cooldown if I hit 4 people. There's 2 seconds of devotion. We're talking about 5 to 4 seconds of downtime. And in that time, I can auto attack. My auto attack's not really fast, right? It's pretty basic. I get 2 to 3 auto attacks out in there. I get maybe 3 to 4 auto attacks in there. I cap this out. I W again. And now that second healing pass through is incredibly high. My cooldown reductions are still high. A lot of that can work out in my favor. Expecting my team to line up or the enemy team to line up so that I get maximum value of heals and damage, maybe not the easiest. There's been several different tweaks to this over time. I think this is a pretty healthy one in terms of it rewards you for being active as Uther, but it's not a guarantee because you could easily just go into auto attack, get tossed in, get stunned, get blown up, and then now your 16 sucks. which is why Benediction, it's so easy to pull off that anybody can do it, and stunning somebody for 2 seconds is still really good. Level 20, level 20 has been weird because we saw major changes to the level 20 talents earlier this year, and we saw no other real changes to kind of push Uther into the meta. Now Divine Shield also applies to all nearby allied heroes and lasts 1 second longer. It's like a sanctification as long as your team is grouped up. They all get this, and it lasts for 4 seconds. Absolutely nutty. But going back to one of the earlier thoughts of, as an Uther, it's my job to kind of die, right? Post level 20, the number one thing you cannot afford to do is to kill an Uther. Where in the world is Bulwark of Light good? It's a very rare circumstance. I think this requires a lot of coordination for your team to group up to get the benefit. 4 seconds of Divine Shield is probably going to be better than me healing for a lot longer. But for everybody that's here, Redemption is going to be very good. If I know that the enemy team, and honestly, unless I'm playing in Grandmaster, I don't think anybody's going to avoid killing an Uther. They kill whatever's right in front of them. So if I'm Uther, I'm going to run in, I'm going to get a bunch of cooldowns. I go through a couple of cycles, and then my cooldowns are just too long. There's nothing I can do. So what's the best bet for me at that point? It's my best bet to run in and die, whether it's... I don't want to like full die. Like if my teams are fighting here and this is their team and this is my team, I'm not just going to like run all the way behind them and try and die in structures. Like what I mean is run in and make people want to kill me. So in that situation, it's up to me to die. So now I have that flash of light every couple of seconds and I'm dead for 8 seconds and I'm passing out heals like candy. Now when I come back, which is what this does, this can be the difference between winning and losing a fight. Now I come back, I win that fight. Post level 20 fights can often be game winning, right? If you're post level 20, they're post level 20, means it's late enough in the game that if you win that fight, you should go in the game, right? So winning a level 20 fight is fantastic. This is what makes it so good. And using this means that you revive after you die. And so now that time that you've been dead, all your cooldowns are back. You're getting more cooldown reduction. And you just spent 8 seconds healing everybody on 2 second cooldown, 100% uptime on armor, basically, for whoever you're healing, if you're cycling it. So there's a lot of things that go into that. You're passing out armor, you're passing out heals. Then you come back and you have all of your abilities again, and you're Uther again back for another fast fight. And fighting Uther twice in a fight with all of his cooldowns is hard enough. Fighting him twice is even harder. So Redemption has traditionally been the pick for a very long time. There is some merit for Divine Protection to increase Devotion's armor to 50 and its duration by 0.5 seconds. And if we go back to the level 1 talent, we're now looking at 4 seconds of armor. And if you have your W cooldown from 10 seconds to 7 seconds and or excuse me, I guess it's going to be when we look at the devotion, when we go to 3 seconds, not 4. So you get a half second here and half second here. We're talking about potentially 3 second cooldown, so 10 to 7, and then 50 armor for 3 seconds. We're talking about 4 second downtime of not having 50 armor potentially for your entire team. If I'm pressing W onto 3 targets, that's insane. And then if I hold my Q for the right moment, that's another 50 armor for priority target during those 4 seconds. And then I have a W again. So there is some merit to Divine Protection that can actually be very good, and a lot of things that go along with it. So I think that Divine Protection can be good, but normally one of Uther's biggest weaknesses is his healing throughput, and you conquer that by going the right, playing around your cooldowns, be willing to die and help your team, and try and find that. I think a lot of these just haven't really been tested a lot. So Divine Protection, Bulwark of Light, we haven't seen that because we haven't seen Uther's healing buffed enough to really make these able to be picked. I think now we're in that area to where I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing Divine Protection or Bulwark of Light start to pop up because his healing throughput is now better. Is it better enough to where you can afford not to die as an Uther and try and get redemption value? Probably not. But dying as an Uther post level 20 is the difference between winning and losing a fight. Get your cooldowns out there. If it goes through 2 cycles, at that point, you should be looking to go in and be aggressive, get that Holy Fire value, get that stun value, go in there, make people want to target you, get them down. If you're going to die, if you're like, oh no, this is a really bad situation, and I probably should have said this earlier. Let's say I've gone through 2 cycles and it's like, oh no, this is bad. I need to die so that I can heal my team. Make sure and use Divine Shield first, because you have 8 seconds before you can use it again, and your healing's probably not going to be enough to cure everybody. So make sure and save somebody in that situation if they need saving, then come back and heal again. The armor and the cooldowns are going to be enough for you. So use Divine Shield before you die the first time, if you can help it. Just don't use it on yourself. That's bad. But that's Uther. There's a lot of complexities. It always baffles me when a hero is listed as easy. When the buttons to press are super easy. Point and click stun, I point my W at people, and that's it. And my Q, I just point at one person, and it's pretty easy to see what they need. But because he has armor, because it affects your health and all of the different things around Uther, it makes it very different to understand when and where to use these things. And because of that, I think that's what makes Uther actually more difficult than he appears, is understanding your cooldowns and when to use them. By no means is he foolproof. Some of the things that you know to be right will easily be countered because you might miss, your team might dodge your W, and now you're waiting on long cooldowns that are punished by the enemy team, and it gets weird. It gets really weird at that point because you don't have shorter cooldowns and because you can't help your team. Cleanse stuff up, pass the armor around, potentially hold your healing so that you can use the armor, and then stagger your heals so that you don't have to worry about that. And there's a lot of things you got to play around that with Uther. It can be difficult at times. This is kind of a pretty in-depth guide in terms of what I was trying to get out there, because Uther can be complex. Because going out there and smashing your buttons, boom, easy. Battle Uther, go out there, double Benediction, Divine Storm. Who can survive that? It's what you do outside of those moments that really matter most. So try and utilize Uther, get those single target kills, reset, unless your team is snowballing hard, reset and do it again. Reset and do it again. You're talking about a 10-second cooldown on a point and click stun. Kill somebody 10 seconds later, if they still want to brawl, boom, you got your W and your Q to fight again, and nobody can really fight through that armor, fight through the burst heals, and fight through point and click stun. So try and utilize that as best you can if you're playing with friends. Uther becomes better. Solo queue Uther is probably the hardest healer out there, but friend Uther a lot better. But new Uther, no mistaking about it, is much, much better than he was before. Greater healing throughput, better cooldowns, maybe new Uther meta. Let's go.